What if I told you the sushi on your plate right now could contain radiation from nuclear bombs we detonated decades ago? According to scientists, it's not a question of if, but how much. 67 nuclear bombs were detonated in our oceans, some with 3,000 times the power of Hiroshima. The seafloor is still glowing, and that radiation, it's moving up the food chain. In this video, you'll see classified footage only recently declassified. You'll learn why researchers are finding nuclear radiation in the deepest parts of our ocean, 7 miles down. And most importantly, you'll discover why governments worldwide are suddenly rushing to monitor seafood imports in 2025. What I'm about to show you is backed by research from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, Columbia University, and it starts with Operation Crossroads, a nuclear test that changed our oceans forever. July 25, 1946, the U.S. military detonates Baker, a 23-kiloton nuclear bomb, 90 feet underwater at Bikini Atoll. What happened next shocked even the scientists who designed it. The explosion created a phenomenon never seen before, a massive dome of radioactive water called the Wilson Cloud, containing 2 million tons of irradiated seawater and pulverized coral. When it collapsed, it created something deadlier than the blast itself. The military expected an explosion. What they didn't expect was the base surge, a radioactive tsunami that contaminated 73 target ships instantly. Sailors sent to decontaminate these ships weeks later began vomiting and losing hair within hours. What nobody understood then, and what government documents have only recently admitted, is that underwater nuclear tests create unique forms of radiation that last centuries longer than atmospheric blasts. And they spread through the ocean in ways nobody predicted. Dr. Catherine Rollins explains, water slows down neutrons, making everything they touch exponentially more radioactive. It's like the difference between throwing matches at a forest versus soaking the entire forest in gasoline first. After that first test, we didn't stop. We accelerated. Between 1946 and 1996, 5 countries, the US, Soviet Union, UK, France, and China, detonated 67 nuclear bombs in our oceans. While the Soviet Tsar Bomba, history's most powerful nuclear weapon, was detonated in the atmosphere with 3,333 times more power than Hiroshima, the Soviets didn't stop with atmospheric tests. Their underwater detonations in the Arctic followed soon after, creating environmental damage we're only beginning to understand today. These weren't just weapons tests. They were the largest uncontrolled experiments in human history. And we're the lab rats who are just now discovering the results. Scientists always suspected radiation would remain near test sites. In 2019, everything changed. Researchers from Columbia University found something impossible, unexpected radiation levels in the Mariana Trench. The deepest part of our ocean, 7 miles below the surface and thousands of miles from any test site. These levels weren't just detectable, they were higher than expected, even exceeding levels found near the Fukushima disaster zone. The deepest, most pristine part of our ocean has become a repository for humanity's nuclear legacy. The scientists discovered something else that kept them up at night: plutonium hot particles. These microscopic radioactive fragments don't just sit at the bottom of the ocean, they move through the food chain. Marine biologist Dr. Emma Chen explains, these particles are consumed by bottom feeders, which are eaten by larger fish, which are eaten by even larger fish. And eventually, they end up on your dinner plate. We call this bioaccumulation, and it means the radiation concentrates as it moves up the food chain. Think about that the next time you eat tuna, swordfish, or any large predatory fish. The FDA doesn't test for these particles because until recently, they didn't know they needed to. In 2013, scientists made another disturbing discovery: radiation reefs. These are living coral structures that have incorporated radioactive isotopes into their physical structure. These reefs are literally building themselves out of radioactive materials. And as fish feed on these corals and small organisms living in them, they're ingesting concentrated doses with each bite. With a half-life of 24,000 years, plutonium-239 remains hazardous for over 100,000 years. These radioactive reefs could outlive human civilization itself. That radioactive sediment? Scientists now call it a radiological time capsule. For decades, we thought it was safely buried. We were wrong. In 2022, a JAMSTEC expedition mapped nuclear test craters at Bikini Atoll. They found these craters, some over 250 feet deep, have become radioactive traps with radiation levels 1,000 times higher than surrounding waters. The problem? These sediments don't stay put. Underwater earthquakes and increasingly powerful storms are disturbing these radioactive graveyards, releasing trapped radiation back into the water. With climate change intensifying ocean storms, this is happening more frequently than ever before. After the testing ended, the US government built what they called a permanent solution, the Runit Dome in the Marshall Islands. This concrete dome contains 111,000 cubic yards of radioactive debris. Officials promised it would never leak. Today, rising sea levels and coastal erosion have compromised this concrete coffin. Radioactive material is already leaching into the Pacific Ocean. The government's own reports admit the dome's failure is not a question of if, but when. When it collapses completely, and every expert agrees it will release enough radioactive material to contaminate a significant portion of the Pacific Ocean. The government has no evacuation or containment plan. The scariest discovery came in 2023. Dr. Jonathan Warner of the Marine Biological Laboratory found genetic mutations in fish populations near former test sites. These weren't just any mutations. They were inherited mutations appearing in fish born decades after the testing ended. His research team concluded, "We've conducted a multi-generational genetic experiment on ocean ecosystems with no control group. The effects we're seeing today may only be the beginning of a biological cascade that could last centuries." These mutations aren't limited to fish. They've been documented in marine mammals, seabirds, and, most concerning, in human populations that consume seafood from these regions. 3 generations later, Marshall Islanders still have cancer rates 40% higher than the global average. So why haven't you heard about this before? Internal government documents declassified in 2021 reveal a systematic effort to downplay these risks. A memo from 1968 stated, "Public awareness of long-term contamination could create economic concerns about seafood consumption and tourism that outweigh any actual health risks. Recommend continued monitoring without public notification." This policy of silence continued for decades. When independent scientists attempted to study these sites, they faced restricted access, funding cuts, and, in some cases, direct government interference. This isn't just an American problem. The Soviet Union conducted 130 underwater and underground nuclear tests in the Arctic Ocean. Today, Russian officials admit these tests created what they call underwater radiation hotspots that are migrating with shifting Arctic currents due to climate change. France detonated 193 nuclear devices in French Polynesia, creating what locals call the Poison Islands. A 2021 study found that 97% of residents on nearby islands have detectable levels of cesium-137 in their bloodstream, a radioactive isotope that only comes from nuclear weapons. China's tests in the South China Sea created what oceanographers call radiation rivers, underwater currents, carrying radioactive material throughout the most heavily fished waters on Earth. These waters provide 12% of global seafood consumption. Things are finally changing. In early 2025, a global seafood study found traces of contamination in 83% of samples tested. While not yet dangerous, it confirmed nuclear residues are widespread throughout our ocean food chain. This triggered something unprecedented. 6 major governments simultaneously announced new seafood monitoring programs. For the first time, they're testing for the specific radioactive isotopes created by underwater nuclear testing. Scientists call this the critical window. We have perhaps 10 to 15 years before bioaccumulation could create genuinely dangerous levels in larger predatory fish like tuna and swordfish. There is hope. A breakthrough technology developed at MIT in 2024 uses genetically engineered algae that can extract radioactive particles from seawater. Initial tests show they can reduce radiation levels by up to 60% in contained environments. More promising is the International Ocean Remediation Initiative, launched in March 2025. The first cooperative effort between nuclear powers to address the legacy of testing. Their goal? Reduce radiation in test sites by 90% within 20 years. Dr. Sylvia Earle, legendary oceanographer, puts it simply, "For decades, we've treated the ocean as too big to fail. Now we realize it's too important to fail. This isn't just about saving marine life, it's about saving ourselves." The ocean holds the memory of every nuclear bomb we've detonated. That memory is written in sediment, in coral reefs, in the genetic code of marine creatures, and potentially in us. The decisions we make in the next decade will determine whether our grandchildren inherit oceans that are healing or oceans that are dying, whether they can safely eat seafood or whether it becomes a toxic relic of the past. The ocean remembers everything we've buried in it. The real question is, will we act before it's too late? If this video shocked you as much as these facts shocked me, share it. The first step toward healing our oceans is acknowledging what we've done to them. And if you want to dive deeper into ocean science, marine conservation, and upcoming breakthroughs, subscribe now. Our next investigation reveals how the deepest creatures on Earth are fighting back against human pollution in ways scientists never thought possible. Next time you eat sushi, remember, what's on your plate could carry the weight of history's most powerful weapons. This is just the beginning. The ocean's darkest secrets are just waiting to be uncovered.